The heavy thud of tactical boots echoed against the metal lockers, a sound that shouldn't exist during recess. Amara Vance didn't think, she simply lunged, her fingers locking around Kang Min-Ho's small hand, yanking him behind the supply closet door as the first glass pane shattered. Red laser dots danced across her white blouse. These weren't school resource officers. The weapons were military grade, suppressors gleaming under fluorescent lights. The lead operative's eyes locked onto hers through his tactical visor, cold and clinical. Amara's breath caught. They weren't here for ransom. They were here to erase. Min-Ho clutched his tattered teddy bear, his small body trembling. The boy didn't make a sound, but his eyes, those impossibly wide eyes, screamed everything. The fire alarm lever hung 3 feet away, her only chance. Behind her, she heard the distinct click of a weapon switching from safe to fire. Amara's palm slammed against the fire alarm lever with enough force to send pain shooting up her wrist. The piercing shriek filled the hallway, but it wasn't the sound she needed. She needed the fog. 5 seconds. That's how long the old system took to activate. The lead operative raised his weapon, the suppressor aimed directly at her chest. Min-Ho's fingernails dug into her forearm, his teddy bear crushed between their bodies. 4 seconds. "Target acquired," the man said, his voice flat and mechanical through the comm device. "Eliminating witness." 3 seconds. Amara dropped, pulling Min-Ho down with her as the first shot punched through the supply closet door exactly where her head had been. Splinters exploded across her shoulders. The boy whimpered, the first sound he'd made. 2 seconds. She crawled, dragging him toward the junction where the west hallway met the main corridor. If she could just reach the corner before... 1 second, the overhead sprinklers erupted, but not with water. White chemical fog burst from every nozzle in thick, choking clouds. The halon gas flooded the corridor in seconds, designed to starve electrical fires of oxygen. It turned visibility into a wall of nothing. Amara couldn't see her own hands. She heard the operatives shouting, their boots pounding closer. Tactical lights cut through the fog in scattered beams, sweeping left and right. They were hunting blind. She pressed her mouth against Min-Ho's ear. "Don't let go of me. Don't make a sound." His small fingers tightened around hers. She felt the dampness of tears on his cheeks, but he stayed silent. Amara knew this building. 15 years she'd walked these halls. Every crack in the tile, every loose ceiling panel, every shortcut the janitors used. The operatives had floor plans and blueprints. She had muscle memory. She moved low, one hand trailing along the wall, the other locked around Min-Ho. The service corridor entrance was 12 feet ahead, hidden, behind a fake panel that looked like every other section of wall. Most teachers didn't even know it existed. A tactical light swept inches above her head. "Movement, 3 o'clock!" one of them barked. Boots thundered toward the wrong direction. They'd seen another teacher fleeing down the opposite hallway. The distraction cost them precious seconds. Amara's fingers found the release catch. The panel clicked open. She shoved Min-Ho through first, then squeezed in after him, pulling it shut just as a beam of light cut across where they'd been crouching. The narrow service corridor was pitch black and smelled of industrial cleaner and rust. No fog down here. No lights. But there were metal stairs that led down to the basement, and the basement had exactly one exit that led to the athletic fields. Min-Ho's ragged breathing was the only sound besides her own hammering heart. She hoisted him onto her hip, his legs wrapping around her waist, and started down the stairs. Every step was calculated, silent. Behind them, muffled by concrete and steel, She heard the operatives tearing through classrooms, shouting coordinates, demanding status reports. They were looking for a body count. Amara intended to disappoint them. The basement exit door hung 20 feet ahead, daylight bleeding through the gap at the bottom. Amara could see the athletic fields through the reinforced glass window, empty except for the swing sets swaying in the breeze. Freedom. Safety. Police sirens wailed in the distance, finally responding to the chaos above. Min-Ho shifted against her hip, his teddy bear's torn ear brushing her neck. She adjusted her grip on him, her muscles screaming from carrying his weight, down 3 flights of stairs. Almost there, just a few more steps, and the stairwell door above them crashed open. Basement level, I have visual. Amara ran, no stealth now, just pure survival instinct. Her shoes slapped against concrete as she sprinted toward the exit, Min-Ho bouncing against her, his small arms locked around her neck. The first shot sparked off the metal handrail beside her. She zigzagged, using the industrial storage shelves as cover. Boxes of old textbooks, broken desks, anything between them and the bullets. "Stop running," the mercenary shouted, his accent thick. "Make this easier." The exit door was 10 feet away. 8 feet. 6. Min-Ho turned his head to look back at their pursuer, his body shifting in her arms, exposing his small frame. Amara saw the mercenary's stance change, weapon adjusting to track the boy's movement. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She twisted hard, swinging Min-Ho behind her back as the shot cracked through the air. White hot fire tore across her shoulder. The impact spun her sideways and she stumbled, nearly dropping the boy. Blood bloomed through her white blouse, spreading like spilled wine. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Her good arm slammed against the exit door's crash bar. Sunlight flooded her vision as they burst outside, and she kept running across the grass, her shoulder screaming with every step. Behind them, the mercenary reached the doorway, weapon raised. Then a black SUV came out of nowhere, tires, shrieking as it cut across the field, positioning itself directly between them and the shooter. The SUV's doors flew open before it fully stopped. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with military precision. They weren't police. They weren't rescue workers. They were something else entirely. Something that made the mercenary behind them freeze mid-step and slowly lower his weapon. Amara clutched Min-Ho tighter, her bloodied shoulder throbbing. She tried to back away, but her legs finally gave out. She collapsed onto the grass, using her body as a shield over the boy. "Don't touch him," she gasped, her vision swimming. "Don't you dare." "Ms. Vance." The voice was cold, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Step aside." She looked up. A man stood before her, tall and lean, in an immaculate charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. His face was angular, almost sculptural, with sharp cheekbones and eyes like black ice. Everything about him screamed control, from his perfectly styled hair to the way he held his hands loose at his sides. The stance of someone who'd never needed to prove his danger. Behind him, at least a dozen men fanned out across the field, weapons drawn. 2 of them had already cornered the mercenary against the building. The man didn't resist. He just stood there, staring at the suited man with something that looked like recognition and resignation. I said, "Step aside." The cold man's gaze flicked to her shoulder, assessing the wound with clinical detachment. "You're injured. My men will—" "No." Amara's arms tightened around Min-Ho. The boy's face was buried against her neck, his whole body shaking. "Not until you tell me who you are." Something flickered in those ice-cold eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "I am Kang Ji-Hoon. That is my son you're holding." The name meant nothing to her, but the way his men stood at attention, the way even the wounded mercenary had gone pale, that told her everything she needed to know. This man was power, the kind that didn't ask twice. Ji-Hoon stepped forward, his movements fluid and controlled. Min-Ho, come to father. He reached out his hand. Min-Ho turned his head, just enough to see his father's face. Then he screamed. It wasn't a child's cry of relief or joy. It was pure, primal terror. Min-Ho's scream tore through the air, high and desperate, as he scrambled to bury himself deeper against Amara, his fingernails clawing at her back. No, 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 the boy's voice broke into sobs. Don't let him take me, please. Yoma, please. Ji-Hoon froze. His outstretched hand hung in the air, fingers slightly curled, as if he'd been struck. For the first time since he'd arrived, his perfect mask cracked. Confusion flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been pain. Min-Ho, he said, his voice softer now, almost uncertain. It's me. It's... No. The boy's scream intensified. Not him. Not him. Amara felt Min-Ho's tears soaking through her blouse, mixing with her own blood. She didn't understand what was happening, why this child would fear his own father, but her instincts overrode everything else. She wrapped both arms around him, shoulder screaming in protest. It's okay, she whispered against his hair. I've got you. I've got you. Ji-Hoon stood motionless, his hand still extended, his expression frozen somewhere between rage and devastation. Around them, his men shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to do when their untouchable king had just been rejected by his own son. The cold man who'd arrived like an avenging angel now looked almost human. Almost. If a father's broken mask and a child's terror just made your heart stop, hit that subscribe button. You'll want to see where this pain leads. A medic approached from one of the SUVs, medical kit in hand. Ji-Hoon raised one finger without looking at the man, and he stopped immediately, 3 feet back, waiting. Everyone was waiting. Min-Ho! Ji-Hoon's voice was carefully controlled now, the kind of control that came from years of suppressing everything human. Look at me. The boy pressed harder against Amara, his small hands fisting in her blood-soaked blouse. She could feel his heart hammering against her chest, rapid and terrified like a trapped bird. Son, I need you to... She saved me. Min-Ho's voice cracked, raw and desperate. He turned just enough to point at Amara, his tear-streaked face fierce despite the fear. She saved me. The bad men came and she threw the smoke and she carried me and she... His words dissolved into sobs. He buried his face back against Amara's neck, his whole body shaking with the kind of trauma that would leave scars no one could see. Ji-Hoon's jaw tightened. He looked at Amara for the first time with something other than cold assessment. His eyes traced the wound on her shoulder, the blood staining her clothes, the way she held his son despite clearly being on the edge of collapse. Ms. Vance, he said quietly, I understand you've been through an ordeal, but that is my son. I need to get him to safety and you need medical attention. If you would just... Ioma! Min-Ho's voice pierced through everything else. He twisted in Amara's arms, pointing at her with one shaking hand, while the other clutched his tattered teddy bear. Ioma! My Ioma! The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Ji-Hoon went absolutely still. Not the stillness of control, but the paralysis of a man who'd just taken a bullet he couldn't see coming. His eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine emotion breaking through his frozen exterior. What did you say? His voice was barely above a whisper. Ioma. Min-Ho said it again, softer now, almost reverent. He reached up and touched Amara's face with his small palm, as if confirming she was real. My Ioma, she came back, just like you said. You said she'd come back. Something in Ji-Hoon's face shattered. It wasn't dramatic, no tears, no collapse, but Amara saw it clearly. The ice cracked and underneath was something raw and broken that he'd spent years burying. He took a step back, then another, as if distance could protect him from what his son had just said. One hand came up to his face, fingers pressing briefly against his temple before he forced them down again. He doesn't remember. Ji-Hoon's words were directed at no one, or maybe at himself. The trauma. He doesn't remember. Remember what? Amara asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Ji-Hoon looked at her then, really looked at her. His eyes were no longer ice. They were something worse. They were grief, barely contained, threatening to spill over. His mother, he said, his voice hollow. She died, protecting him. 3 years ago. An attack, just like this one. He gestured at the school, at the chaos, at the blood on Amara's shoulder. You threw yourself into the line of fire for a child you barely knew. You shielded him with your own body. His voice cracked just slightly, just like she did. Min-Ho tightened his grip on Amara, pressing his face against her collarbone. Don't leave me again, Ioma. Please don't leave me again. Ji-Hoon closed his eyes. When he opened them, the mask was back, but it didn't fit quite right anymore. Amara woke to silk sheets and the smell of antiseptic. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, medicinal ache, the kind that came from professional stitching and powerful painkillers. She sat up slowly, her head swimming, and took in her surroundings. The room was stunning. Cream-colored walls, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her car, a bathroom visible through an open door with marble floors and gold fixtures. Soft, recessed lighting gave everything a warm, expensive glow. No windows, she stood, her legs unsteady, and walked the perimeter. Solid walls on all sides, and the door was heavy wood with an electronic lock that glowed red. She tried the handle anyway. Locked. You're awake. The voice came from behind her. Amara spun, her heart racing. A woman stood in the doorway when had it opened, mid-40s, sharp features, wearing tactical pants and a fitted black jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes assessed Amara the way a chess player studied the board. Who are you? Amara demanded. Han Seo-jun, head of security for the Kang family. The woman stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. You've been unconscious for 8 hours. The doctor treated your wound. Clean shot, no permanent damage. Where's Min-Ho? With his father. The boy asked for you 17 times before he finally fell asleep. Seo-jun moved to a small table near the bed and poured water from a crystal pitcher into a glass. You should drink. The IV fluids aren't enough. Amara ignored the water. I want to leave. I'm afraid that's not possible. Excuse me? Seo-jun's expression didn't change. You've been brought to a secure location for your own protection. The men who attacked the school are part of a larger organization. They will come for you. You're a witness, a liability. Then put me in protective custody. Call the police. I'll give a statement and... Half the police force is on someone's payroll, Ms. Vance. We don't know whose. Seo-jun's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. The attack was coordinated, inside information. Someone knew Min-Ho's schedule, his classroom, his routines. Until we identify the leak, you're safer here. This isn't safety. Amara gestured at the windowless walls. This is imprisonment. Call it what you like, but you will remain here until further notice. Seo-jun moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Kang has made arrangements. Your apartment has been secured. Your personal belongings will arrive tomorrow. Your school has been notified that you're taking an extended leave due to the trauma of the attack. You can't just... We already have. The door opened and Seo-jun stepped into the hallway. There are clothes in the wardrobe. Breakfast will be brought at 8. Min-Ho will want to see you after. What if I refuse? Seo-jun looked back at her, and for the first time, something almost sympathetic crossed her features. Then a traumatized 8-year-old will spend another night screaming for his dead mother while his father watches helplessly from the doorway. She paused. Mr. Kang believes you're a good person, Miss Vance. That's the only reason you're in this room and not a more secure location. Don't make him reconsider. The door closed with a soft, final click. Amara stood alone in her beautiful cage, the electronic lock glowing red like a warning light. She thought about her apartment, her students, her life, all of it suddenly as distant as a dream. She walked to the wardrobe and opened it. Inside hung clothes in exactly her size, tags still attached. Designer labels she'd never heard of. Someone had been very thorough. On the bottom shelf sat Min-Ho's teddy bear, freshly cleaned, the torn ear carefully stitched back together. Amara picked it up, her fingers tracing the new seam, and realized with sinking clarity that Kang Ji-Hoon didn't make mistakes. He'd planned for her to stay. The breakfast arrived precisely at 8, wheeled in by a young man who wouldn't meet her eyes. He left quickly, the door locking behind him before Amara could even consider rushing it. She picked at the food, perfectly prepared eggs, fresh fruit, coffee that smelled expensive, and waited. Min-Ho would come. Seo-jun had promised that much. But it wasn't the boy who arrived first. The lock disengaged at 9:30. Ji-Hoon stepped inside, dressed more casually now in dark slacks and a fitted black shirt, though nothing about him would ever look truly relaxed. He carried a tablet in one hand and something else tucked under his arm. Ms. Vance. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that might have been respectful if she weren't his prisoner. I hope you rested. Cut the pleasantries. Why are you here? To explain. He set the tablet on the table, then placed the other item beside it, a photograph in a silver frame. You deserve to understand what's happening to my son. Amara looked at the photograph and felt her breath catch. The woman in the image was Korean, beautiful, laughing at whoever held the camera. She stood in a garden somewhere, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a small boy who couldn't have been older than 5. Min-Ho, younger but unmistakable. Park Ji-woo, Ji-Hoon said quietly. Min-Ho's mother, my wife. Ji-Hoon already told me she died, Amara said, not taking her eyes from the photograph. 3 years ago. He told you she died protecting him. He didn't tell you how. Ji-Hoon activated the tablet, and security footage filled the screen. This is from the parking structure beneath our previous residence. Amara watched, her stomach tightening. The footage showed a woman, Ji-woo, walking with a young Min-Ho, holding his hand. They were laughing about something. Then a van screeched around the corner. Men poured out, weapons drawn. Ji-woo reacted instantly. She grabbed Min-Ho, threw him behind a concrete pillar and positioned her body between him and the gunman. Even as the first shots hit her, she didn't move, didn't run. Just stood there, arms spread wide, a human shield until her legs finally gave out. The boy in the footage screamed for his mother as she fell. Amara felt tears burning in her eyes. Turn it off. Ji-Hoon did. The silence was suffocating. Min-Ho was 5 years old, he continued, his voice carefully controlled. He watched her die. Therapy helped, or so we thought. He stopped having the nightmares, started speaking again, went back to school. He paused, his jaw tightening. But he never forgot the moment she chose him over her own life. And yesterday, You threw yourself into the line of fire for a child you didn't know. Ji-Hoon's eyes met hers, and she saw the weight of understanding there. You shielded him with your body. You took a bullet meant for him. You carried him through a war zone while bleeding. He gestured at the photograph. The therapist believes his mind couldn't process another woman sacrificing herself for him. So it rewrote the narrative. He thinks I'm her, Amara whispered. He thinks his mother came back. Not consciously. His rational mind knows Ji-Woo is gone. But the trauma, the fear, the desperate need to be protected by someone who would die for him. Ji-Hoon's voice cracked slightly. His mind chose the simplest solution. You became her. Amara sank into the chair, the full weight of the situation crushing down on her. This is temporary. When he calms down, when he feels safe again. The therapist arrives this afternoon. She'll assess him. Ji-Hoon picked up the photograph, his fingers tracing the frame's edge. But I've seen my son's eyes when he looks at you, Ms. Vance. I've heard his voice when he calls you Aoma. He looked at her then, and for the first time since she'd met him, Kang Ji-Hoon looked like a father who'd lost everything and found it in the worst possible place. I don't think this ends when he calms down. I think this ends when you choose to break his heart. Dr. Yoon arrived at 2:00, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had witnessed too many broken minds. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades navigating the darkest corners of human psychology. Amara sat across from her in what Ji-Hoon called the family room, another windowless space, though this one had been designed to feel less like a cage. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, children's drawings pinned to a corkboard. Min-Ho's artwork, she realized. Stick figures holding hands under crayon suns. Ji-Hoon stood near the door, arms crossed, his posture rigid. Seo-jun lingered just outside, a silent sentinel. I've reviewed the footage from the school, Dr. Yoon said, her voice gentle but clinical. I've also spent the last hour with Min-Ho. Ms. Vance, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear. Just say it. Min-Ho's attachment to you isn't a simple case of misplaced gratitude or hero worship. It's a dissociative survival mechanism. Dr. Yoon pulled out her own tablet, displaying what looked like brain scans. When a child experiences severe trauma, especially trauma that mirrors previous trauma, the mind sometimes creates bridges, shortcuts to survive the moment. You're saying his brain is protecting him, Amara said slowly. In the crudest terms, yes. His first trauma, watching his mother die, created a wound that never fully healed. Your actions yesterday reopened that wound, but simultaneously offered a solution his psyche desperately needed. Dr. Yoon's eyes were kind, but unflinching. You became the mother who didn't die, the mother who came back. It's not rational, but trauma rarely is. Ji-Hoon shifted by the door. What happens if we tell him the truth? If we force him to acknowledge that Ms. Vance isn't his mother? Dr. Yoon was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of certainty. Complete psychological collapse. The room went cold. Define collapse, Amara said, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. At best, severe regression. He'd stop speaking, stop eating, stop engaging with the world. He'd retreat so far inside himself that reaching him again could take years. Dr. Yoon paused. At worst, catatonia, a complete detachment from reality, as his only defense against a truth his mind can't integrate. You're saying I have to lie to him. Amara's voice was barely above a whisper. I have to pretend to be his dead mother. Not pretend, not exactly. Dr. Yoon leaned forward, her expression earnest. You don't need to claim your Ji-Woo. In fact, You shouldn't. But you do need to allow him to feel safe with you, to let him attach to you as a maternal figure without challenging the foundation of that attachment. Not yet. Not while he's this fragile. For how long? Months, possibly longer. With proper therapy, we can slowly help him differentiate between his mother's memory and his current reality. But it must be gradual, gentle. Any sudden confrontation with the truth right now would be catastrophic. Amara looked at Ji-Hoon. His face was a mask again, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped his own arms like he was physically holding himself together. "This isn't fair," Amara said. "To him or to me. I have a life, a job, students who need me." 23 students who are alive because of you, Dr. Yoon said quietly. "But right now, one child's entire existence depends on whether you can bear this burden a little longer." That's manipulation. That's the truth. Dr. Yoon stood, gathering her tablet. "I don't have the luxury of gentle suggestions, Miss Vance. My job is to tell you the psychological reality, not to make it easier to accept." She moved toward the door, then looked back. "Min-Ho is waiting in the next room. He's been asking for you since I arrived. What you do next will determine the trajectory of his entire life." The door closed behind her, leaving Amara alone with Ji-Hoon. "I can't force you to stay," he said finally, his voice low. "If you truly want to leave, I'll have Seo-jun arrange transportation. I'll have my lawyers draft an NDA. You'll receive compensation for your time and your injury." He paused. "But Min-Ho will break, and I will have to watch my son disappear into a place I can't follow." Amara stood, her legs unsteady. Through the wall she could hear it, a small voice, tentative and fragile, calling for someone. Calling for her. "Where is he?" she asked. Ji-Hoon's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Next door. He has his teddy bear. He won't put it down." Amara walked to the door, placed her hand on the handle, and realized that Dr. Yoon was right about one thing. What happened next would determine everything. She opened the door. If the weight of Amara's impossible choice is sitting heavy on your chest right now, don't forget to subscribe. Some decisions echo louder than you think. Min-Ho fell asleep in her arms after an hour, exhausted from crying and clinging and whispering, "Ioma," like a prayer. Amara had held him, stroked his hair, and felt the full weight of the trap closing around her. She'd stayed with him until his breathing deepened, until his small hands finally loosened their death grip on her shirt. Then she'd carefully transferred him to his bed, a child's room decorated with robots and stars, and slipped out while he still slept. Seo-jun had been waiting in the hallway. He hasn't slept that peacefully in 3 days. "Where's Ji-Hoon?" Something flickered across Seo-jun's face. Surprise, maybe. "His private dojo, 3rd floor, east wing. But Miss Vance, he doesn't like to be disturbed when—" Amara was already walking. She found him 15 minutes later, after navigating a maze of corridors that felt deliberately complicated. The dojo was sparse and brutal. Hardwood floors, mirrored walls, and nothing else except practice weapons mounted on racks. Ji-Hoon stood in the center, moving through forms with lethal precision. Sweat darkened his shirt. His movements were controlled violence, each strike perfectly executed, devastating in its efficiency. He saw her reflection in the mirror, but didn't stop, didn't acknowledge her presence. Amara walked onto the training floor anyway. "I'm not taking your money," she said. That made him pause. He turned, breathing steady despite the exertion. "Excuse me?" "Whatever you're planning to offer me, hush money, compensation, whatever you want to call it, I don't want it." "Ms. Vance." "I saw the checkbook on the table in my room. the blank one with your bank's logo. Very subtle. She crossed her arms, ignoring the pull in her injured shoulder. You think you can buy my cooperation, pay me to play house with your traumatized son, and disappear quietly when it's over. Ji-Hoon's expression remained neutral, but she saw his jaw tighten. That was meant as consideration for your time, your sacrifice. I don't want consideration. I want terms. Now she had his full attention. He grabbed a towel from the bench, wiping his face while studying her with those cold, calculating eyes. You're negotiating with me. I'm establishing conditions for my cooperation. Amara stepped closer, refusing to be intimidated by the way he towered over her. You want me to stay, to help your son? Then you're going to help mine. Your son. My students, all of them, every kid in that school district. Her voice hardened. Sunshine Grove Elementary is in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Our library has books from the 1990s. Our computers barely function. We have one counselor for 400 students. The building that just got shot up, we've been begging for updated security systems for 5 years. Ji-Hoon listened, his face unreadable. You have resources, Amara continued. You have money. You have power. So here's the deal. I'll stay as long as Dr. Yoon says Min-Ho needs me. I'll be whatever he needs me to be. But in exchange, you're going to fund a complete overhaul of that school district. That's a significant investment. You were ready to write me a blank check. This is just directing it somewhere useful. Something almost like respect flickered in his eyes. And you're going to find out who let those men into my school. Not just the mercenaries, the people who helped them, the corrupt cops who looked the other way, the officials who provided intel. Her voice dropped, fierce and uncompromising. You're going to root them out and make sure they never endanger another child. Ji-Hoon was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the bench, picked up a water bottle, took a slow drink. When he looked at her again, the cold mask had shifted into something harder to read. You realize what you're asking requires me to expose corruption in the police force. To go to war with people who have their own power, their own connections. I watched children dive under desks while bullets flew past their heads. I watched a boy lose his mind because evil men decided his life was worth less than whatever grudge they're holding against you. Amara's hands clenched into fists. So yes, I'm asking you to go to war, because that's apparently what you do. The silence stretched between them, tension thick enough to cut. Then Ji-Hoon smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it transformed his face from cold to something almost human. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Vance. I'm a teacher who just spent 3 days in a war zone and a cage. I'm well past caring which one I am. He set down the water bottle and extended his hand. I accept your terms. The school district will have its funding. The corrupt officials will be identified and dealt with. You have my word. Amara looked at his offered hand. She thought about Min-Ho sleeping peacefully for the first time. The contract arrived the next morning, delivered by a lawyer in an impeccable suit who looked like he'd never smiled in his life. 23 pages of legal language that essentially boiled down to what she and Ji-Hoon had agreed to in the dojo. The school district funding was outlined in excruciating detail. New security systems, updated technology, library expansion, additional counselors, structural repairs. Millions of dollars committed in black ink. Amara signed it with her uninjured hand while Min-Ho ate breakfast beside her, his small feet swinging under the chair. He'd barely let her out of his sight since yesterday, following her like a shadow, always reaching for her hand. Ioma, can we go to the garden today? He asked, syrup on his chin. Appa said there are butterflies. She wiped his face gently. Maybe after your session with Dr. Yoon. He nodded, solemn and trusting, and something in her chest tightened. This boy, who'd been terrified of his own father, now smiled. When Ji-Hoon entered the room, as if having Amara present made his world safe enough to let his father back in. Ji-Hoon had noticed too. She'd caught him watching them yesterday evening, Min-Ho showing her a drawing, her praising the crooked robot, the boy's face lighting up. Ji-Hoon had stood in the doorway, silent, and for just a moment his mask had slipped enough for her to see the grief underneath. The knowledge that his son needed someone else to feel whole. The papers regarding the police investigation are in the study, Ji-Hoon said, appearing in the breakfast room with his usual silent precision. Seo Jun has identified 3 officers with suspicious financial activity. We'll move on them by the end of the week. I want to see the evidence before you act. He raised an eyebrow. You don't trust my judgment? I trust that you're efficient. I want to make sure you're thorough. She met his gaze steadily. These are public servants who betrayed children. When they go down, I want it to stick. Something flickered in his expression. That same, almost respect she'd seen in the dojo. You'll have full access to everything we find. Min-Ho looked between them, sensing the tension, but not understanding it. Appa, are you and Yoma working together? Ji-Hoon's eyes met Amara's across the table. Yes, he said quietly. We are. That evening, after Min-Ho had finally fallen asleep clutching his teddy bear, Amara stood alone in her suite's bathroom. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized. The woman looking back had harder eyes than the teacher who'd arrived at school 5 days ago, planning a lesson on fractions. This woman had dried blood under her fingernails that wouldn't quite scrub out, had a bullet wound healing on her shoulder, had negotiated with a crime lord and won, had become a mother to a child who wasn't hers. She touched the mirror, her fingers tracing the reflection's face. Somewhere behind her, beyond the locked door, armed guards patrolled corridors in a fortress built on violence and power. In a room down the hall, a little boy slept peacefully because he believed she'd never leave him. And in his study, a man known as the Ghost of Seoul was hunting down corrupt officials because a schoolteacher had demanded justice. Her phone, returned to her that morning with all her contacts intact, buzzed with messages from friends, from other teachers asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. They thought she was recovering from trauma in protective custody. They had no idea she was building something else entirely. Amara pulled her hair back, securing it with a tie. Her reflection straightened, shoulders back, chin up. The woman in the mirror didn't look like a victim anymore, didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like someone who'd found her power in the strangest place possible. In the gap between a child's broken heart and a father's desperate love. In the space where teacher became protector, where negotiation became revolution, where a cage transformed into a throne. Tomorrow, she'd start teaching Min-Ho again. Not in a classroom, but in the garden he'd mentioned. She'd read to him, help him heal, be the anchor he needed. But she'd also review those police files, would track the money, would make sure every person who'd enabled that attack faced consequences. Amara Vance wasn't just a teacher anymore. She was something new, something forged in gunfire and blood and the desperate love of a traumatized child. She was the matriarch of the fortress, and God help anyone who threatened her family again. If you just realized this teacher became something you didn't see coming, hit that subscribe button, because women like her don't stop at one revolution.